Alright, so the Campfire stream ended a few hours ago, and I have been taking this time to prep and go over my notes that I took and get some screenshots for you guys so that way we can go over it as a group, as a community, and we can all discuss some of these changes. There are actually a lot of changes to classes in this one, not just Sorcerer and not just Barbarian, but those are the main two they told us that they were focusing on, is Barbarian and Sorcerer. So a lot of the patch notes are going to be for those, but they do have some for Druid, some for Rogue, and some for Necro as well as we have information on what they're going to do for some of the uniques like Temerity. They have information on what they're going to do for one of the hearts. They have information and screenshots on the before and after of the mob density with the Nightmare Dungeons as well. And they dropped some cool information as well during the stream, which we'll go over at the end as well. So to start off with the list of buffs here, we have the Barbarian. Let me switch my camera over real quick. So for the Barbarian, I don't actually play a Barbarian or a Sorcerer. I did play Sorcerer during the beta, but I don't remember a lot about it, so I won't be able to tell you detailed information about how these are going to be impactful, but you can already tell that a lot of these are huge changes, like charge. The damage is increased from 30% to 60% for the enhanced charge over there. And the enhanced rupture is increased from 45% to 70% as well. Double swing is 40 to 50. The fury that you gain from lunging strike is from 10 to 12. And then of course there's just like minor 1 to 2, maybe 3 point gains here and there. But a lot of these are going to be majorly increased because they are percent increases, or they will be stacked upon and multiplied because they are just stat bonuses that can be massively increased. Alright, so continuing on to the next image they showed off for the Barbarian over here, you can see that Upheaval is getting a major change. So if Upheaval damages at least 2 enemies or a boss, you gain Berserking for 2 seconds, increased to 3 seconds if it damages at least 4 enemies as well. And some of the passives are getting a 1% boost there to Aggressive Resistance. Gushing Wounds is getting a pretty big 15% damage boost. This is one that he actually called out specifically was going to make him nervous about how it's going to work. They had that happen a few times. The main lead designer for the classes, the lead guy that's actually tuning all these classes and kind of in charge of all the classes, he was kind of mentioning how some of these are going to make him a little nervous because they might end up being really broken, but he's like, we're going to do it anyway. We're just going to go for it. We're going to do it. And this was one of them for Gushing Wounds as well. So of course you can pause and look at all these that you want to use. I believe I have all the stat pages. If I don't, let me know in the comments down below if there's any that I have missed, but I believe I have a screenshot from every slide they showed. And so the next one that we have is actually a bunch of legendary changes for the Barbarian's legendaries, because I've been hearing a lot of people talk about how the Barbarian's legendaries and aspects and even the uniques are just not very good. So this is a massive list of changes towards, like, you can see the aspect of Ancestral Charge over there is from 50 to 100%. Now it's 75 to 125. That is a massive change. And aspect of Unrelenting Force is from 10 to 20% to 20 to 30, and it has additional functionality, so the cost refund is also granted when you're hitting bosses. And of course we get a major buff there to the damage reduction while an earthquake from the aspect of Bull Kathos, that's the one. That one is from 5 to 15 to 15 to 25, so pretty major buff there for your legendaries as well. And so the next tab that we have is the Barbarian uniques. A lot of your uniques were not very good, so now they're buffing a ton of them. So because they nerfed cooldown reduction, they're actually changing a lot of these from cooldown reduction affixes to critical strike damage bonuses, which is a pretty nice change, and they're buffing the damage. So the one they called out specifically was Hellhammer, because this one is one that they want people to use, I guess, and it's going to be a major change now. And they did make sure to mention that if you would like some of these new stats, like on Hellhammer, where they changed the crowd-controlled enemies affix to bonus critical strike damage, if you want that change, it's not retroactive, so you'll have to farm for another Hellhammer, which is unfortunate, but at least you're going to get a better buffed Hellhammer whenever you farm for the new one. And that goes for any unique changes. As far as I'm aware, you have to get a new version of that item for any of these major affix changes to happen. But that being said, the stat bonuses, so if they change it from, 15% to 25% or whatever, if any stat changes like that, those will be instantaneous. Alright, so now we have the Rogue, so your skills are getting a pretty big boost actually too, and they even mentioned on stream that the Rogue is in a really good spot, but they didn't want to leave the Rogue out because a lot of the stuff for the arrow builds, a lot of the bow builds for Rogue are not feeling super great. So you can see Forceful Arrow there was changed to every third cast pierces through all enemies, and Rain of Arrows has been changed to where Rain of Arrows' first wave will knock down enemies for 3 seconds, not the second wave. So some pretty useful changes to how the skills actually work to hopefully better utilize them in higher tiers. And of course, Poison Trap is better, and Invigorating Strike is also getting a major buff too. So all of you rogues that were already pretty much running the entire show anyway, are now going to be even crazier. So another one for the rogues here is your passives and your legendaries. So your passives are getting a huge buff there with Victimize, getting a lucky hit chance of 10% increase there. Rugged is actually getting a damage reduction against damage over time enemies increased from 612 to 18 all the way to 918 27. That's crazy. That's a huge buff there. And then Siphoning Strikes, which is already crazy good anyways, having a lucky hit chance increase from 75 to 85% there, so a 10% bonus there. And then for your legendaries, things like Aspect of Elusive Menace no longer requires hits to be from close enemies, which is going to be crazy good there. And then Aspect of Quickening Fog is going to change to you automatically drop a smoke grenade at the end of your dash, and smoke grenades reduce your dash's cooldown by 0.4 to 0.6 seconds per target hit up to 3 seconds, which is going to be pretty good there too. Alright, so now for the Sorcerer changes over here. So to start off this list, we have the passives are being changed. So Veer's Mastery is now getting a 5% boost there. Isu's Veracity, they made a special note of this one too. So now you're getting both bonuses and granted for 3 seconds when hitting a boss with a critical strike, so it's pretty good there. Combustion's pretty good now as well, getting a pretty big change there as well. So your passives are getting a pretty big buff there for the Sorcerer. Now your skills, you can see a lot of these are for Firebolt, Fireball, Chain Lightning, the ones that were just not really used because Ice Shards were just too good. So now your other skills should actually be pretty good too. And for Chain Lightning, they made a special mention that Greater Chain Lightning will now buff damage when it bounces off of anything. So you can see right there, it says changes to each time Chain Lightning bounces, its next hit deals 5% increased damage. Now it's not just bouncing off of you, now it's not just like a boss melter, now it's just bouncing in general. This was one I believe they also called out that he was nervous about making because it was going to make it really, really good. So go ahead and use this one. This one should be really good now. So these are your new skills that are being buffed. I'm excited for you guys. So now we also have this tab over here for your Paragon boards. And you can see here in the Paragon section that you have 3 different ones, actually 4, that are increasing your damage reduction. So hopefully Sorcerers will be a little less squishy going forward. So you've got some really good stuff in the Paragon tree over here. Again, feel free to stop and pause to read any of these further if you guys want to. But then we've also got this one over here, which is more Paragon changes. So once again, even further damage reduction from things like burning enemies or vulnerable enemies or anything like that. So you're getting a ton more extra life, a ton more damage reduction. You're just getting a ton more stuff like that so you can actually survive longer, that's just fantastic for the Sorcerer. The Sorcerer is by far the squishiest class, with the Necromancer only being slightly tankier because we have the blood skills. Alright, so now moving on to the next slide over here, you have the legendaries for the Sorcerer. Let me go ahead and put my camera right about here. That should be good. So these are all of the stats that are being affected for your legendaries. So the ones that they did call out was ones like the Serpentine aspect up top there. They had made a special mention that that's something they're trying to do in the future in general is less, I think they referred to it as reducing the Kiss Curse effect that you have. So basically, they're not going to nerf something without giving you a buff elsewhere. And that goes for all classes, not just Sorcerer, not just Barbarian, but they did call out the Serpentine aspect because it will no longer reduce any of the effects that it had before, so now it will just give you the additional Hydra. And so if we move on to the next one, you have even more of your legendaries are getting changed because, again, Sorcerer legendaries were just bad. So you can see a ton of these are actually really big changes. There's at least 5% here, 10% there, or even complete and total changes to how they work. So like the recharging aspect now just says each time Chain Lightning bounces, you gain 2 to 3 mana. So these are crazy changes. They're big buffs. They're 5, 10, 20%, or even more than that as well. And the next tab we have is also for Sorcerer because even, again, so many of your legendaries were so underutilized and so underpowered that they're changing a ton of them. So your legendaries are going to be even better. Basically, the Sorcerer is going to be possibly a new meta just because people are going to want to play it and try it out once these patches go live. Not meta in the sense of maybe top damage, but who knows what people can make with all these crazy damage bonuses. I don't quite know yet. We have to test it out, but there's a lot of buffs here for Sorcerer. And one they made sure to call out is the legendary aspect for Incendiary. That one they made sure to call out as well because that's another one that they said was going to worry them because of how good it's going to be because they changed it from like fire damage to pyromancy skills. So your damage from your pyromancy skills has up to a 12 to 17% chance to restore 10 mana. So way more skills are now viable with that aspect right there. At least I think that was the change from it. Again, I don't play Sorcerer, but let me know in the comments down below how good these changes are, which one excites you the most, what builds you're going to try with these, let me know for sure. So now the next tab, we have the uniques for the Sorcerer. So the gloves of the Illuminator are getting a very big buff where the damage penalty alone is a huge buff. So you're not going to nerf yourself by putting these gloves on. They're changing the stunned affix to lucky hit chance to restore resource. They're adding just a ton of good stuff to this one here. This is your one unique being changed, but you had like 12 legendaries being changed, so enjoy that. And now the next tab is the Necromancer. So the Necromancer are actually getting a buff too, because while everybody thinks the Necromancer is the most OP, there's still a lot of stuff on the Necromancer that's underutilized or not too good, and now this patch is aiming to fix that. So like Bone Spirit is having the cooldown reduction increase from 6 seconds to 7 seconds. So then for the Paragon, you have the Wither board. The legendary node for Wither says that the willpower requirement for the bonuses was reduced from 50 to 40. So now every 40 willpower, you're getting that damage bonus. And the damage bonus per 40 willpower was increased from 2.5% to 4%. So that Witherboard legendary perk over there is going to be crazy good now, or at least potentially better and more worth picking up. The legendaries, you have Empowering Reaper. It is now changed to damaging enemies with Sever has a 10 to 20% chance to spawn a pool of Blight under the target that deals 20 to 60% bonus damage, and it can only happen once every 3 seconds. So they changed this one because this one was unbelievably bad. This is the one that said that you have to have Sever critical hits to have the chance of spawning a pool of Blight, so you had to get a high crit build to have a chance of spawning a Blight. Now it's just damaging enemies with Sever, not tied to crit anymore, which is fantastic. And then this is going to be a huge change to Exposed Flesh. So a huge change here says that it is now lucky hit up to a 10% chance to generate 30 to 50 essence when hitting a vulnerable enemy with any skill, not just with bone skills, but with any skill. So Exposed Flesh is going to be on a lot more builds now because you can actually generate a ton of essence with a lucky hit build on there. So going to the next tab, we have more Necromancer changes here as well. So the Aspect of Decay is going from 20 to 40% all the way to 25 to 45% there as well. Aspect of Torment is being changed to Essence Regeneration increase from 20 to 30 to 90 to 170%. So if you don't know what the Aspect of Torment is and why this is going to be unbelievably good for any bone builds, because that's the one that says critical strikes from bone skills increases your essence regeneration by, it used to be 20 to 30%. Now it's 90 to 170% increase for 4 seconds. So any bone builds are going to basically be able to regen mana stupid fast. And even the hulking aspect, the one that said that your golem had like a 1 to 4% chance to reduce its active cooldown by 2 seconds, and a 0.5 to a 2% chance to spawn a corpse whenever it damages enemies with its normal attack, that one's being buffed a lot too. So the first stat, so the chance of your golem reducing its own active cooldown by 2 seconds, is now at 2 to 5%. And the chance to spawn a corpse is from 0.5 to 2% all the way to 1 to 2.5% chance to do that. So that's going to be a better aspect as well. And then the Greaves of the Empty Tomb over there is really, really good. They called this one out specifically as well because they know that the Necromancer is typically the slowest one out of all the classes. So they replaced the Intelligence affix with Movement Speed. So you can run these with a Sever build and actually keep up with your friends. We don't know the percent it's actually going to be for the bonus movement speed, but any percent at all is going to be fantastic. And so now the next tab, we have the Druid buffs here. So for you Druid people out there, your Earth Strike, Claw, Storm Spike, Wind Shear, Maul, and Wolves are also getting a buff. They made a specific mention to not only the Necromancer minions, but also the Druid minions. That's what this patch is going to be doing, is going to be improving the Wolves as well, so that your minion build on the Druid can actually be good. So a lot of those first set of skills are just getting more spirit back, so you're not feeling so constrained by your spirit generation. But the Wolves are getting a passive damage increase, active damage increase as well, and skill changes to like Enhanced Wolfpack is going from 20 to 25%, Brutal Wolfpack is going from 20 to 25 as well, and then Ferocious Wolfpack is going from 5 to 8%, so major bonuses here to the Wolves. And the next one that you have is again for Druids. This is for your skills, legendaries, and your class mechanic. So you have your Ravens are getting a buff there too. You have Rabies damage increase from 76 to 110%, so anybody who's using Rabies in their build is going to be insane. Your legendaries like Aspect of Metamorphic Stone is having its spirit cost reduced from 60 to 50, and the damage dealt increased from 80 to 100% all the way to 100 to 120%, so pretty much a 20% buff across the board there. Aspect of the Alpha is from 75 to 100 all the way to 90 to 115 now. That's the new damage numbers, which is crazy. And then Mangled Aspect is having its resource gain from 1 to 3. That's crazy as well. And then your class mechanic is having Overload Lucky Hit chance increased from 20 to 40%, which is crazy because Lucky Hit's fun. Alright, so now for the Malignant Heart changes that they announced as well. So these ones are basically going to be, there's only one here, which is Caged Heart of Spellbreaking. So it's now going to change to, upon taking elemental damage, you gain 10 to 20% damage reduction for 5 seconds. This one's going to be huge. I feel like a lot of people are going to use this because it's just general damage reduction. They even called out on stream that damage reduction in general, just as a basic stat, is huge right now, especially because resistances are so broken. So now going on to the unique changes, which is just Temerity, but they said that they thought Temerity was going to launch as this crazy good item that was going to be amazing, but then was underperforming and everyone didn't like it. So now they're changing the all-stat FX to max life. The barrier is now based upon maximum life, and now it's actually going to check if you have a barrier to account for those conditions on the Temerity as well. So it's going to be a huge change to Temerity. I feel like this one is going to be really, really good for any sort of like tanky health build. Like a Thorns build with Temerity might actually be insanely good now because you're always going to have barrier on. You're always going to want to go max life. You want to be as sanely tanky as possible for Thorns. So any Thorns build is pretty much going to want to go for Temerity, at least in theory. And then the next tab we have over here is the before. So they mentioned about the enemy density with the Nightmare Dungeons. This is the before tab. So you can actually look at all the red dots on the map. Those are all of the enemies that they showed. That's what's in one dungeon right now. This is the pre-density buff. And here's the after density buff. So that's how many enemies are going to be in like just a random example dungeon after the density buff, which is quite a bit. I'm going to assume someone's going to go out there and count all of the dots and get like a rough estimate of how much percentage increase is going to be happening here, but that's a good amount of dots. If we go back to the previous one here, you can actually see it's like double, it looks like, or maybe like a 50% boost to enemies. So going from before to after, you have a ton more enemies in these dungeons, which is going to be amazing for not only loot, but XP as well. Oh, and before I forget, this tab was also in there too, showing that the minions are actually getting a damage reduction from a couple different enemies in the game. So like the Balrog's Fire Breath will not just like one-hit your minions for some reason, and the elite affixes like Fire Enchanted, Electrified Obelisks, and the Shock Lances won't just instantly break your minions apart. And that goes for the Druid Companions and the Necromancer minions as well. So we will have to see how the minions and Druid Companions feel with these changes as well, because that's majorly awesome. This is fantastic for minion builds, so your minions will just live longer. And that's not all they mentioned as well. So basically they also talked about how they did a poll on Twitter to see what people thought the Treasure Goblin's like loot chance for a legendary item was. Everyone thought it was like 10%. Turns out Treasure Goblins had a 50% chance to drop a legendary, but now after patch 1.1.1 goes live, you're going to be able to get a legendary item guaranteed from Treasure Goblins starting at level 15, which is an amazing change. That's going to make Treasure Goblins actually worth going after to get that guaranteed legendary. They also mentioned how we're going to get one additional stash tab and it will cost 400,000 gold. They also made a mention of removing 3 Nightmare Dungeon affixes from the game because they are just too strong, like too brokenly OP, and they're going to be removing them and maybe adding them in later on down the road once they can actually rework them and make them not so broken, and it's going to be Cold Enchanted, Resource Drain, and Backstab. They also mentioned that they're going to be increasing the survivability of the Sorcerers for late game, which we can actually see from a lot of those buffs to the Sorcerers. It's basically just making it to where you can survive longer in the end game. On top of that, Barbarians, as you can see from some of the changes, the Barbarians are actually getting a primary resource a little bit easier, so that's their goal, is to make it to where Barbarians can get their primary resource back a lot easier, and their late game uniques will be a lot better. They did also mention, though, speaking of uniques, they did also mention that they're wanting to go through a lot of the uniques for basically the entire game and all of the class uniques as well, and buff them in the future too. They don't really have a time for that one, no time frame for that, but they did mention about buffing all the uniques for all classes. And they also mentioned making other builds more viable that have lackluster skills or aspects that add more flat damage that don't really scale very well. They mentioned like Bone Storm, for example. They want you to use Bone Storm because Bone Storm is awesome, not not just because of what it actually adds to your character for like the crit chance and the damage reduction and stuff like that. They want you to use Bone Storm because Bone Storm is awesome. Same with Earthquake. They said they want you to use Earthquake because it's awesome, not because of what it can do for you. And then last but not least, we have that patch notes will come out August 2nd, and the patch will actually release. The patch itself will come out on August 8th. So you have about 2 weeks before this patch will actually come out, and you have about a week before you'll even know what's in the full patch. So for anybody who's actively waiting and their Sorcerer or Barbarians are just kind of sitting there, you're going to be waiting about 2 more weeks before this patch comes out, and about another week before you even realize what the heck is in it. So overall, I actually think this is a really nice patch. A lot of the things they buffed in this patch are going to make the classes feel better overall, and I'm actually really excited to see what it feels like when a lot of these changes go live. It's going to make me and a lot of other people really want to make a new Sorcerer or make like a Druid or Barbarian or something to really see how these can actually go. So that will do it for today's video, guys. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for hanging out with me. Let me know how you feel about these patch notes in the comments down below. Let me know what your favorite thing is about these patch notes and what you're going to actually try in the game once the patch goes live. What classes you're waiting on. Is it Barbarian? Is it Sorcerer? Are you excited for the Rogue buffs? Are you excited for the Necromancer buffs? What are you excited for? On top of that, in case I missed any patch notes that you think are imperative or very important for us to know, let me know in the comments down below. I wanted to include every slide that they showed off, but I might have missed one. So if I did, let me know in the comments down below. And also, if you guys are new here, feel free to hit that subscribe button on your way out for plenty more Diablo content in the future. And also, don't forget to come follow me on Twitch. I stream this game all the time. We like to have fun. We like to play different classes and stuff like that. But right now, I am a Necromancer main because Necromancer is really fun. So if you guys want to come hang out on Twitch and join the community, drop a Prime sub or whatever you guys want to do, that'd be awesome as well. But thank you very much for watching. I'll see you guys in the next video. Thanks for hanging out. Have fun. Bye, guys.